Hey everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today as we unpack a truly fascinating story. Back in the ancient world, deities and great leaders were, well, they were generally expected to be super stoic, distant, virtually untouchable. Honestly, empathy was often viewed as a weakness. But today, we're going to look at a narrative that completely flips that historical expectation right on its head. We're exploring the life of Jesus, but we're focusing on the profound compassion and the deep empathetic connection that really defined his journey. Now, this isn't just going to be some clinical list of historical dates. We're actually looking at why his emotional intelligence was so revolutionary for that time period. So get comfortable, settle in, and let's explore the powerful humanity behind literally one of history's most well-known figures. Okay, let's dive into this. When was Jesus born? Now, historians often debate the exact year, usually placing it somewhere between 6 and 4 BC. But honestly, the narrative we're exploring today isn't overly concerned with just circling a date on a calendar. It's way more concerned with the setting itself. Think about it. He wasn't born in some grand palace to a wealthy ruling class. The texts actually tell us he was born in a manger, literally surrounded by livestock, simply because there was absolutely no room at the inn. And asking about his birth highlights these incredibly humble origins, which, right off the bat, instantly established a connection with everyday struggling people. It really sets the stage for a life that would become entirely defined by its emotional accessibility. At its core, this is a story. Our source material distills his entire legacy down to this one foundational concept. It is so easy to get caught up in massive historical or theological debates, right? But framing this as a narrative, it invites us to actually understand the human element. Just think about his everyday interactions for a second. For example, the texts describe a time he met a marginalized Samaritan woman at a well. And by simply asking her for a drink of water, he broke major, deeply ingrained cultural and social taboos of the day. Why? Just to ensure she felt seen, to ensure she felt valued. Viewing his life through this specific lens forces us to focus on these one-on-one connections, reminding us that right at the center of the historical record is a life lived intimately alongside other people. Let's see how this timeline builds. The source material frames this journey in 3 distinct, highly emotionally charged phases. It begins with the mystery and humility of his birth that we actually just talked about. Then it transitions into a period of profound anticipation, phrased here as when will it begin? This is the waiting period, It represents the quiet emotional buildup and the preparation during those years before his public life really starts. And finally, all of that anticipation absolutely explodes into the third era, giving sermons. This is the vocal, public realization of his teachings. His life wasn't just some sequence of random events. No, it was a deliberate build of emotional momentum, moving from quiet origins straight into radical, sweeping public outreach. So the crucial point is this. His journey was a narrative defined entirely by deep feelings, empathy, and a truly heartfelt connection. Emotion was the driving engine of his actions, not just some byproduct. To really see this in action, consider the fact that the absolute shortest verse in the entire biblical text is just 2 words. Jesus wept. It happens right before he raises his friend Lazarus from the dead. And what's wild is, even though he supposedly knew he was about to perform a miracle and fix the whole situation, physically seeing the pure grief of Lazarus' sisters, it moved him to tears first. He felt their pain so deeply before doing anything else. He connected with the human condition in a way that was fundamentally, undeniably driven by the heart. And this brilliantly illustrates his primary method of connection. He didn't just stand there and deliver strict rules or cold, detached philosophy. Actually, instead of rigid edicts, he used parables, relatable stories. He talked about a shepherd recklessly searching for one single lost sheep, or a prodigal son being welcomed back, not with a harsh lecture, but by a father literally running to him in tears. These sermons were intensely emotional because they used the language of ordinary life to connect deeply with people's actual everyday struggles. When he spoke, he wasn't talking down to crowds, right? He was translating pure empathy into action, making his words resonate with anyone who had ever felt lost or broken or left behind. Now, what's really fascinating about this overarching idea is how it brings everything full circle. Because those compassionate sermons didn't just happen in a vacuum. They created a massive ripple effect. The text actually tell us the crowds of thousands would follow him out into the wilderness for days at a time. They'd completely forget to even pack food just to hear him speak. They were absolutely starved for this unprecedented level of empathy. Everything from those humble origins to his super relatable parables merges into this single cohesive identity. His entire existence essentially became synonymous with radical compassion, leaving a lasting legacy that went so far beyond the typical leadership of that era. Which brings us to our final and perhaps most important thought. how does this emotional story continue to resonate today? We've traced this incredible journey from a humble manger to a life completely dedicated to shifting the cultural narrative through pure empathy. But the true power of this kind of life is that it absolutely refuses to stay lost in ancient history. It actively asks us to evaluate our own capacity for connection right now, today. As we wrap up your deep dive, I really want you to consider this. In a modern world that so often prizes hard facts, status, and